So for those of you who studied yoga at all, there are 7 levels of samadhi, but more important than that, samadhi is, so to speak, the goal of yoga. And there are 7 levels to that goal. And actually, in each one of those levels, there are multiple stages. So it can be kind of never ending, the access towards the goal. And samadhi is if you know the eight limb path of yoga, the yamas, the niyamas, the asana, the pratyahara, the sense control, and the breath control, and then concentration, meditation, and samadhi. So these are the 8 levels, or the 8 limbs of yoga. So samadhi is the crown jewel. That's what we're going for. And it is both very elusive and it's also very ever present. And that's really the point that I want to make today, that everybody does experience samadhi, but in different ways. So let's just talk about, well, first of all, I want to say too, that these levels of samadhi, this is what I was saying earlier, they're both static and dynamic, meaning that we can be in samadhi in meditation, and we can also be in samadhi while we're going about doing things in life. And those of you who practice Reiki, you know this, because a lot of times what happens is we are in a samadhi state, both when we're giving and receiving Reiki. So as I'm talking about these levels, I want you to think about that in terms of your experience with the Reiki, both as a receiver and a giver, because I want you to see, oh yeah, this happens, right? So the first, well, there are 2 basic categories of samadhi. The first one is samprajñata samadhi. That's a hard word to say. It's hard for me to say. And the second one is asamprajñata samadhi. What does this mean? Prajna actually means wisdom, but it also means support. So there is a samadhi experience that is with support. What does that mean? It means that there's always some sort of awareness of prakriti, of this dimension of not just the physical, but of those gunas that most of you have studied, the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas. There's an awareness of this, and there's a certain awareness of self. The awareness of self changes from level to level, whereas asamprajñata samadhi, without support, okay, is where there is absolutely no awareness of I. Okay, that's just the easiest way to say it. Now, these have other names. So saprajñata samadhi is also called sabija samadhi, and sometimes it's called savikalpa samadhi. The word sabija is probably the easiest one to say. So we can kind of go for that. Bija means seed. So a sabija samadhi still is connected to seeds of the prakritic world, of the world of nature, of the world of self. Okay, but here I'm talking about small s self. Okay, and so we've got this first level, and this is where most of us are experiencing. Not many of us are actually going into the asamprajñata or the nirbija samadhi. If we do go into it, it's momentary. To go into it and remain in it, to be stabilized in it, it's rare. It's not impossible. It's, it is truly the highest goal. And in the Gita yoga that I study, it's like, yes, you want to go there and then you want to come back. So that's like the very highest level of enlightenment. So most of us are traveling back and forth between the 4 levels of Samprajñata or Sabija Samadhi. Okay, so the first one, well, the 4 levels are what you see on your page: Savitarka, Savichara, Ananda, and Asmita. Savitarka and Savichara are further divided into 2 categories. Now, okay, so maybe you're thinking like, who cares? Why do I need to know all this? And you don't really need to know all this, except that to be able to identify our own experience, and that's yoga for one, and it also helps us to see what we need yet to do, and it helps us to see what we already are experiencing, because sometimes we've, there's no guidebook on the spiritual path that we're in. So that's what it is. It's a guidebook. And that's why I so much want you all to be able to see for yourself what you have felt and experienced. Now, how to keep that stabilized and maintain it, that's a whole other class. But I do want you to be able to see all this. So the first one, Savitarka Samadhi, it's absorption with physical awareness. Okay, so Samadhi means meditative absorption. Okay, absorption in what? Absorption in awareness, absorption in pure consciousness. Okay, that's what Samadhi means, meditative absorption. So if there is still physical awareness, that means you can be in a really beautiful meditative state and you're still aware of your body. But the example that they give is, so if you were to meditate on a cow, I'm not advising us necessarily to meditate on cows, but if you were focusing on a cow, and of course, the cow is very sacred in India, where this text comes from. When we're in that state of samadhi called Savitarka Samadhi, when we're meditating on that cow, we may have, let's say there's actually a physical cow in front of us. We can see that cow, okay? So there's the physical object that's a cow, but also we're still holding on to the word cow, C-O-W. And we're also holding on to our own image or idea of what a cow is, right? So we meditate on cow. First of all, we're not necessarily meditating on a particular individual cow, but we're meditating on this notion. So there's what they call a conflation. We can't meditate on cow without still having the word cow in our consciousness, and without all our idea of what a cow is supposed to look like, right? Because the truth is, that thing called a cow, we could give it the name pig, and it would still be a cow. And it's only by consensual agreement that we call it cow. But we have that word, and we get identified with the word. So you can be in a samadhi state and still have all those 3 things happening at once. Similarly, we're doing Reiki. We're putting our hands on someone. We're very aware that our hands are on them, right? And we're thinking Reiki, or we're thinking healing, or we're thinking of the person, their name. All right. So and we feel our hands on the body. Is the Reiki still happening? You bet. Okay, so I just want you to get a sense of, that's kind of like this first level of Savitarka Samadhi. There's still conceptualization in there, that putting your hands on somebody and thinking, oh, is this working? Right? Do. Or you're receiving Reiki and you're it's feeling good, and you're thinking, gee, I wonder what they're doing, and is this going to, all those thoughts that happen. So although samadhi is we really want to be in meditative absorption like this. There's no thought. There's still conceptualizing, if that makes sense. So we're not having necessarily a train of thoughts, but there's a questioning or a wondering or a something that's going on. So all of you experience this state a lot. Now, how much you experience it in your daily life, where you're not being driven by the constant thought stream, that varies from person to person. And not being driven by our constant idea of things, rather than just the raw experience. Okay. So the second level of savitarka is called nirvitarka. And this would be when we really are tuned in to the cow itself. And we've transcended words, concepts, memories, impressions of what a cow is. So we could call this cowness, but it's also something else. It's like if I invite you to picture your car, right? What do you see? You see your car with its color, you think about it, you know, its model or its make, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just have some kind of feeling of the car. You see, it's getting subtler and subtler. And that's more what this next level is. So you still close your eyes and you picture your car, but perhaps you're not spending a lot of time going over all the details of it. It's just your car. It's just my car. You know, if I ask you to think about your mother, what do you visualize? You know, do you see an image? It doesn't matter whether your mother's present or not in this world, you know, or is it a feeling? Or is it just simply a knowing? And that's where it's getting subtler and subtler. For those of us who lost our mothers a long time ago, we don't have those images anymore, right? But that mother is still very present in our awareness. Okay, so that's the first level of samadhi. And here's also in Reiki, when I'm sorry, the nirvitarka still we're in the first level. Okay, so in Reiki, I've got my hands on someone, but I'm not really even feeling the hands anymore. I'm just feeling the Reiki. Maybe I'm not even feeling that. But I'm still knowing Reiki's happening. Okay. So then the next level, savichara, which is also divided into sa and nir, with and without vichara. What does a vichara mean? Okay, so the difference between vitarka and vichara, we have one that's absorption, still with physical awareness. Okay, now we're getting outside of physical awareness, but we have subtle awareness. So here, if we're thinking about a cow or focusing or meditating on a cow, we're actually now, we go from this physical idea of cow, or we go from the conceptual idea of cow to a physical impression. I'm sorry, we started a physical impression, conceptual, the name, then all that disappears, and it's just this object. And then we go to this next level, and instead of seeing cow, we're seeing the energies of which it's composed. Now in yoga, that would be the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas. But let's make that more practical. In Reiki, right, we're putting our hands on someone and maybe all we see is their energy, or all that we feel is energy. Maybe the body just kind of disappears in front of us. I think you've all had this experience, at least briefly. And if you haven't had it as a practitioner, you've had it when you're receiving Reiki. Right? It's like you're in it, but you don't have that body. This is what we're talking about, that bodilessness. There's pure awareness. You are still you. You're still receiving, or you're still giving, or you're still in meditation. But there's not that physical awareness. It's an awareness of the subtle energies. This is what energy work is all about. That we're not working with the physical body, we're working with the subtle energy. We're not even working with the emotional thoughts or the mental thoughts. We're working with the energy that composes those thoughts and those feelings. And this is why Reiki heals on all those levels. So in yoga, these subtle energies are called the elemental structure, earth, air, fire, water, etc. And the tanmatras, sound, sight, etc. But I just want to bring it a little bit more down to earth for us, for those of us who do these practices. So with Savichara Samadhi, we're doing Reiki, right? And we're just in the energy of it. We don't have a physical awareness of our body or ourself, or this boundary between ourself and the other person. And then we lose all awareness of extension in time and dimensionality of space. What do we say about Reiki? It works outside of time and space. This happens in meditation too. We're outside of time and space. So then that's the Nirvichara. That's the second level of the second level. Okay. Now beyond this, we get more and more subtle. Okay, maybe we're doing Reiki, maybe we're meditating, but there's absolutely no awareness of the breathing or of the mantra. There's no awareness of anything except we're feeling bliss, ananda, joy, limitless love. This happens in Reiki. It happens in meditation. It actually happens in sexual intercourse as well sometimes, which is why, or in an orgasm, which is why there were certain schools of yoga, the tantric schools that emphasized sexuality. Of course, what we know about that is, boy, is that a fleeting experience, and trying to recapture it can lead into all kinds of other complications. But we all have had these moments of immersion in pure bliss that are outside of time and space. So that's the Ananda, that's the third level. Now in the Ananda, however, there's still this sense of, I'm feeling bliss. This feels good. There's still this witnessing self. Wow. That kind of thing. So there's still what we call a subjective awareness. There's still an awareness of self as subject experiencing bliss. It's not a physical awareness, and it's not necessarily a thought awareness, but there's still this conceptual or notion or idea of that which is experiencing this bliss is me. The next level moves beyond that. It's still pure bliss, but it's absorption in the I amness that is bliss. Now here, this is called Asmita Samadhi. Those of you who took Rhonda's Klesh's class, you heard of Asmita as one of the obstacles. Asmita is used in a completely different way in this context now as Samadhi. Asmita in that context is ego, and it's an obstruction to our progression in yoga. But in this context, in the understanding of samadhi, asmita is what sometimes we call the all-pervading I, the I-ness of being, the beingness itself. We are in the bliss, and there is nothing external to me, and there is nothing that is not me. But it's not the little me of the ego, and that's the difference. You know, the ego can experience bliss and joy. They're emotions for the ego. Boy, it really feels good. Or, you know, it was so great to, to hug you after I hadn't seen you for 4 months. You know, that was joyful. It was blissful. I was experiencing that joy or that bliss. But this is not that. This is the being itself is bliss, and I am being itself. So we call that the all-pervading I. This is the big S self. And I think all of you have had this experience, at least in glimpses. And if you haven't, you will. Okay. Noel?
Oh, I just had a question about, you know, like when there's an experience in a waking, non-meditative state, and it's like, let's just say I had an experience like this the other day where I was, and it happens at times where it's like going really deeply, like listening to another human being about an experience, and then going super deep, like almost into a like quick internal meditation, and then all of a sudden I'm speaking, but it's not me. It's like it's not. Would that be an example of tuning in, tapping into that I amness, or is that something else?
I think it is. It may be more the Savichara Samadhi, where there's just this transcending of time and space, but maybe it is. And I think what you're saying is like, yes, when we're in, when we have the experience of asmita samadhi, of pure beingness, there really is no separation. And so what the truth arises, wisdom arises, and we sometimes just start to speak it, right? And it's not me. It isn't. You're absolutely right. It is not me. It's not the little me self that's speaking. It's not the ego. And this happens to, you know, many of us who are teachers. It's like, you know, somebody says afterwards, wow, when you said that, it was just exactly what I needed to hear. And it was like, I said what?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Where that came from.
And where did it come from? Because yes, in a certain way, we were in the primordial collective stew, and there was something that triggered us saying exactly what that person needed to hear, but it wasn't the mind. Mm-hmm. So it could be just a brief dipping into that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's beautiful.
And can I say one more thing about that experience? Is that I was talking, it was a conversation with my mom, and it was like the conversation wasn't happening with my mom and me. It was a conversation somewhere else between something else. You know what I mean? Not that identification of mom and daughter wasn't even there.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. That's really beautiful. Yeah, exactly. It's that letting go of the concept of cow, the concept of mom, the concept of me. Okay. It's just being. Nina.
That begs the question, what is cow? When you let go of the concept of cow.
Yeah, it does beg the question, what is cow? And it begs the question, what am I? Right? Who is this that is perceiving cow? Yeah. So cow is a concept. There is an animal, right? That walks around on four legs and has udders if they're a girl. But what is that? Well, we just settle for, well, that's a cow. But really, what is it? And that's where, when we get into the more subtle layers, we perceive it as energy. We perceive it as energy moving in certain patterns and certain fluidities. And it's composed of these components of Prakriti that are called Rajasattva and Tamas. So what is a cow? What am I? We are these subtle energies. But we are actually, they're subtle and they're subtle. There's more subtle. The soul is actually not subtle energy. The soul is beingness itself, the source, because the soul is a part of the great soul. It's not like your soul or my soul is so special, because there is only one soul. So yes, it begs that question, and it's a good contemplation. Meditate on a cow. What is a cow?